All right, so we're reviewing integers and operations with integers. You'll notice a number line there. So that number line there is to remind you, always on a number line, we always put the negatives on the left, the positives on the right. And you may never need to use the number line, but it's really a nice idea when you're adding and subtracting to kind of think about what's happening on the number line. Relying on your calculator means you have to enter it exactly correctly. And if there's brackets and stuff, students often forget. So the first part here is just identifying an integer that represents a situation. So profit, does that represent a positive or a negative situation? Put your hand up. Positive, good. Put a plus, but it's understood if you don't have. So we don't often do that. With a drop in temperature, what do you think that is? Negative, yeah. So that for sure, you have to have the negative in front, okay? And again, I'm leaving off the units just because I'm using an integer. Highest number, so that's where you want to look at the number line. Anything to the right in a pair of two numbers is higher or larger. So if I look at -4 and -2, the -2 is to the right, so that one is the largest one. I always think about temperature or being in debt. So -4 degrees or -2 degrees. Which one is warmer? -2. Okay, -3 degrees, -5 degrees. Which one's warmer? -3. I'm just going to erase this so it doesn't mess us up. And then rearranging in smallest to largest, right? So we want the most negative to the most positive. So obviously we start with the negatives. Again, -3 degrees Celsius is warmer, so -8 is colder. So that's going to be my first one, then -3, and then 7 and 9, that just makes sense, right? 7 and 9 degrees would be the warmest. If you're thinking temperature. If you're thinking money, then positives would mean you have that money. Negatives would mean you're in debt to someone, right? So if you're in debt $6, that's better than being in debt $8, right? So -8 is the lowest, then -6, and then 6, and then 8. Those are pairs of opposites, right? Because one's positive and one's negative. So then adding and subtracting, I just copied out the number line and I put some rules here, right? So if you have a calculator, yeah, you might put it in. On the unit test for this unit, you're going to have part that doesn't have a calculator. So you need to be able to do some of these integer questions without, because it's really important in 10C to be able to do that. So here, when you're adding a positive, you move right on the number line. So 3 plus a positive. Notice how sometimes we might have the brackets with the symbol in it. So that really is the same as replacing with one adding sign. So 3 plus 7 is 10. So you're moving right on the number line. If you're adding a negative, then you're moving left on the number line. So 3 minus 7 gets you all the way to -4. There's 7 units going to the left. Then that's going to be the same as if you start at 3 and subtract a positive. You end up at the same because there's one of each here. Okay. And then same sign. So when you're subtracting a negative, that goes right. So these two are the same. Okay, and the two middle ones are. Sometimes my analogy, and I'll give you analogies during the semester, and some you'll groan at and whatever, but you can kind of think about them. So let's say, looking at the second case there, 3 plus -7. So negative, let's think about it as getting sick, getting a cold. So if you are getting something negative like a cold, overall, that's negative. You're going to the left. If you are getting rid of your health, positive being health, then that's a negative. It's going to the left, right? But if you're getting rid of cold, that's a good thing. You're going to the right. So it's kind of just a funny little analogy that I end up using. Okay, so we're going to do a few of these together, and then you're going to work on a few of these before we continue. So here, 5 plus -7, so there's just one negative, right? They're opposite signs there, so you're going to go to the left. So that's going to be, looking at this, 5 to the left 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you're at -2. So use the number line if you need to. Try not to use your calculator right now. Okay, and then subtracting a -7 is like adding. So 5 plus 7, that's just a nice adding question. Getting rid of a positive is subtracting. So 2 to the left 6. So here, if you think about it, 2 to the left 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is at -4. And then adding a positive is just like adding, so that's 8. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to go across to these 4, and then you're going to finish the rest. These don't have the brackets, so you literally do what it says. So it says 3 plus 6, so that's 9, and then you go to the left 11, so that's -2, because 11 is bigger than 9, so it's going to go into the negatives. 4 minus 10, so now you're in the negatives, -6, but then you go to the right 2, which is -4. Now you could group the positives together and then subtract. Sometimes students end up grouping them and miss a negative or whatever. I suggest you just go from left to right, like you read a book. So 5 minus 8, -3, plus 1, -2. -3 plus 8 is 5, minus 2 is 3. Okay, so you finish off those next 8. Okay, so those are the answers to the ones that you were working on. So turn over the page. Okay, again, I have the steps written out in words. This is how I like to remember how to do these operations. Again, you might feel really confident, or you might need to review those notes that I've put in there. So when you're multiplying, you just pretend that they're all, what I do, pretend that they're all positive. So just the digits, multiply those together, and then count up how many negatives you're multiplying together. If there's an odd number, the answer is negative. So I don't necessarily go, okay, let's multiply the first 2 together like in this one, then that answer times this, then that answer times this. A more efficient method is to just look at the digits. So 3 and 2 is 6, and there's one negative. So that means your answer is negative. Okay. Because really it's a repeated multiplication is a repeated addition. So that means the same as -2 plus -2 plus -2, right? Which is -6. Next one, or I'll go across, I guess B is across here. So 7 times 2 is 14, and even number of negatives. So the answer is positive. Then 5 times 2 is 10 times 3 is 30. But again, an even number of negatives, so it stays as 30. Doesn't not matter how many positives there are. You're just looking for how many negative numbers are multiplied together. Okay, even numbers are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, etc. Odds are 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. So next one, 2 times 3 times 2 times 4, so just the whole numbers. So that's 48. And then how many negatives? 3. So that's an odd number. So even if you did want to use a calculator for that, I wouldn't put in all the negatives. I'd go 2 times 3 times 2 times 8, and then use your brain for the number of negatives, right? Because by the time you enter those negatives in your calculator, you're not going to have time to do that for everything. Notice just the different notation here. So in high school math, we tend to use the multiplication symbol a little bit less. So this one has the multiplication symbol. It also has brackets. Brackets together, like the previous ones, mean multiplication. We tend to use the X a little less because we do a lot of algebra, especially when you get to 10C. So an X for a lot of people looks like a multiplication X looks like a variable X, and then that gets really confusing. So we tend to use brackets, or with algebra, sometimes you don't even need that. It's understood to be multiplied. So this 2 times 4 times 6 times 2. So when I'm using just my head, think my fast way to think about this is really 2 times 4 is 8, 6 times 2 is 12. So if I know my 12 times table, 12 times 8 is 96. Okay, and then there's 1, 2 negative, so it's a positive answer. Next one, 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5, so just the digits. So 1 times 2 times 3 is 6, 4 times 5 is 20, 6 times 20 is 120. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negatives, so the answer is negative. Okay. Now I've put in a couple of exponent questions. We'll do more work with exponents as we go, but these are squared and cubes. We'll keep it to that for our order of operations. If it's in brackets, remember junior high, what you learned about an exponent. That means the same as -5 times -5 in brackets. So that's an even number of negatives, so it's a positive answer. Whereas this one is different. That is not -4 in brackets. That's -4 times 4. Okay, so the negative, you can even show it like that. So even though there was no brackets there, the negative is outside the squared, so that answer is -16. Okay, so looking, and part of being good at math is good attention to detail. The better that is, the easier it is for you to figure out what sign the answer is, whether there's like terms in an algebraic question and that kind of thing. Okay. So rules for dividing, basically the same thing. You do your dividing and then look at how many negatives there are. So here it says, divide the digits, simplify each numerator and denominator if needed. So if it doesn't go in nicely, like if it's a fraction, you would just simplify the fraction. And then how many negative numbers are being divided? If both have the same sign, the answer is positive. If they have opposite, it is negative. But sometimes you might have more than one. I think I put a couple in there, like this, where there's more than one factor in the numerator. So that's when you use the same process as your multiplication. Odd number of negatives, answer is negative. So here, I just look at 24 divided by 4. Well, that's 6. They're both negative, so it's a positive answer. 16 divided by 2, that's 8. One of them is negative, so the answer is 8. Um, 12 divided by 4 is 3. One negative, so the answer is negative. So those were shown with the division symbol. Now you might see dividing in fraction form. So you go 20 divided by 5 is 4, one negative sign. 18 divided by 3 is 6, one negative sign. 30 divided by 6 is 5, two negative signs, so that would be a positive. And then these ones with more numbers, you can do it all in your head, Or you can think about the numerator kind of being an order of operation and doing that first. So if you were to do that first, just the digits, that would be 3 times 4 is 12, times 2 is 24 over 8. Take a look at how many negatives. There's 3 of them, so it's going to be a negative answer. And see if that simplifies even further, which it does. Because 24 divided by 8 is 3. You could have done that all at once in your head. I just split it up into 2 steps. Same with the last one. Maybe you want to do it in 2 steps. So 4 times 5 is 20, times 3 is 60 over 6. 1, 2, 3 negatives in total, so it's negative as well. And 6 does go into 60 10 times. So that is the lesson. We've gone through that together. So this will be a fairly similar process each day. Now there's a practice sheet, a lot of similar type of questions. This one here, you use the inequality signs or equal signs. So I'm just going to review that a little bit because students sometimes forget that. So here, this we call the less than symbol. Oops, if I could spell correctly. Because whatever is here, like you read a book, is less than whatever is here. So I think back to Pac-Man because I'm old. And so Pac-Man wants to eat the biggest thing. So it's going to open up to the biggest thing. I think in junior high, sometimes they talk about an alligator, right? And so the biggest is always at the mouth. The words for it, though, are less than because you're reading from left to right. If it's like this, then the smallest is here, the biggest is here, and we call this greater than. So again, Pac-Man's eating the biggest thing. If there's an equal sign underneath, then you just include that, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. But I think in this one, it's greater than, less than, or maybe they are exactly equal. Okay, so there's practice, there's adding and subtracting, answering some word questions about multiplying. Who can tell me what product means? What operation does product mean? Yeah? Multiplication. What does quotient mean? Division. So you'll see that in question 7, and then some multiplying and some dividing, and then you'll see some more practice in puzzle sheets. I call them puzzle sheets. Lots of questions, and usually there's something to sort of decode at the end. I didn't make up the jokes. You don't find them funny, don't blame me. Okay? Sometimes they're silly. Okay, but there's quite a few there. So what's really mandatory is to get the practice part done and try at least, in this case, I've given you 4 puzzle sheets. Try to do at least 2. Okay, then maybe you do the other 2 if you don't get them done. Well, you have a long weekend. You could finish them. Or before the test, right? So whatever you don't finish, you're going to make sure you do before the test so that you're all fresh and ready for that. Okay.